Katie Zephyrs competed yesterday in the triathlon of the Olympics at Rio. She is representing the United States. But she is representing more than just the United States. She is representing a large extended family in Maryland, which includes her church family. Katie was baptized at St. John's in Westminster, and she was raised at St. Bartholomew's Parish, where her parents, Bill and Mary Lynn, still are members today. Her parish priest reports that the family are faithful, always there on Sunday morning. And he said he wished that he had 100 families like that. When I read Katie's story, I could hear the stories of so many people who sit here on Sunday mornings, and I would have said the same about many of you. Katie has always been an active participant in her church. She was active in the youth ministry, and in an interview she said, "The youth group of picnics and trips were my very favorite part. It's a community full of love and support. And that's the best thing about St. Bart's. I always look forward to coming back home and to see everyone at church." Katie has been training for years for her Olympic event, her single event, a triathlon that was held yesterday. And she was asked about, how do you prepare for an event like this? And it was really interesting, one of her answers. She said, "One of my favorite rituals is when my husband and I pray together before bed. One of us will start, and then the other will fill in anything that the other may have missed. And sometimes I learn things about my husband's day, or even just life itself, by just listening to him pray." Today we're going to continue our study on Olympic faith. And I want to ask you this morning, how is your training going? Let us pray. Dear God, I just ask that you open our minds and open my voice to speak a word that brings glory to you. Amen. Pastor John Ortenberg wrote a book, The Life You Always Wanted. And in this book, he says, the secret to winning the race as a marathon runner is not trying harder, but it is in training. It is in training consistently. And John takes and connects that back with the Christian faith, and he says we need to do the same thing as Christians. We don't need to try harder. We just need to be consistent. Consistent through prayer and Bible study and worship and giving. In Christianese, the language of the church, we call prayer and Bible study and giving and devotional life and worship, we call them spiritual disciplines. The interesting thing is the discipline part. Because I think that when we get in our head the idea of a discipline, we have this unbending rule that is put in place. And what Ortenberg tells us is spiritual disciplines are not all-consuming, nor are they an end to themselves, but rather they are exercises. Exercises that build the strength and the endurance for the road to growth. Eventually, they will lead to a life that can be transformed. They will lead to a life in which we have a relationship with God, and that impacts not just our spiritual life, so not just like when we put our church clothes on, but instead it will impact every aspect of our living. Anyone who has ever set a goal knows that it takes work to reach that goal. To reach your target, it isn't instantaneous, but instead it is a process. And often, we call that process of meeting a goal, we call it training. When you train for something, we start out with something very small. And then what we do is we keep adding little by little to it. And then it gets to the point that by just adding a little bit at a time, that we can accomplish something that seemed way too big for us. It's how we work at the really hard stuff in life. Before the Olympics, when the athletes get ready, what they need to do is they undergo very strict preparation for the competition. In the same way, we must train in our Christian life. We need to train our spirits to go through the spiritual disciplines such as prayer and fasting and reading of God's Word. And by doing this little by little, we will reach our goal of being transformed. No one, let me repeat that, no one wins the gold the very first time they dive, the very first time they take a tumble on the mat, the very first time they throw a basket at the net. No. They need to train. So everybody say train with me.
Train.
Say, I need to train.
I need to train.
We need to train.
We need to train.
Right, because training isn't just about athletics. Training is about anything we do in life. If you are going to play an instrument, what did you say you play now? Cello. If you play the cello, do you have to practice? Yes. Yes, you have to play. If you're going to come and go into do a solo or be a part of an ensemble, you need to pick up that instrument and you need to practice, which practice is called training, over and over again. A few weeks ago, we had 3 young men that stood on this stage to get their Eagle Scout awards. And, you could tell by their sashes that were just chock full of little badges that this was not the first award that they had ever been given. Of course not. We have an Eagle Scout. We have a couple Eagle Scouts here, I think, today. It isn't, yeah, Barry and AJ. Anyone else an Eagle Scout in here? Yeah, Adam? Yeah, great. You know, the Eagle Scout Award is like a culmination of all of your youth working for something. It's training. What happens is you work at something that's smaller, and then you work up to the big project. Has anybody here ever had to train for something big? I know Jasmine's in the back, but I know she does some training. She's now doing some weightlifting, and that's part of her training. Anybody else train for something like a big event? Come on. There has to be somebody who's in training of some kind, right? Well, yes, that's the answer. It's like the little kids when we ask them, everything is God. Yes, but we are training for our entrance into heaven. We need to train. Now, there is a difference between preparing for a single race and building your faith. You know, there are some people who, will train for something, and then when that's over with, they're never going to pick up that, violin again. They're never going to play the piano again. They might not ever even race again. But for us, as Christians, we are working for something that is far more precious than the gold. And we are working as a team. So rather than a single athlete, we're more like a basketball team. That we need to be giving each other opportunities and assisting one another so that together as a team, we are helping, that we're not working against, but that we are assuring that there is not just one winner. It's not just all about us, but instead, there is a whole team of winners. There are some really important things that Paul the Apostle believed that we as Christians could learn from athletes. Paul points out that first we need to train hard and we need to train well. And he says and he's specifically talking about athletes that are running in the Olympics. I shared that, this was part of Greek history. And he said, they don't run aimlessly. They stay focused. So it means that if you decide to practice something, it's not all willy-nilly. You have a plan. When you're working on your spiritual life, it is really easy to get distracted. I don't know about you. You might have a greater capacity for concentration than me. But I have all good intentions. I pull out my Bible and I'm going to read it. And then my mind begins to wander and I think about the things I have to do later. And then I'm like, oh, I have to write that down. And then the phone rings. And then I remember that there's something that I have to do. And there goes my entire devotional reading time, consumed with distraction. Roll down the tunes. Training begins with us trying to stay focused. We probably know it's important to read the Bible, but it is actually not as easy as it sounds. We have to work at it to do it every day in our life. Maybe you need a partner to read it with. Yeah, amen is right. I know Mary and Evelyn read together each day. Sometimes we need someone to hold us accountable to reading the Bible. The other thing is that when you train, and if you're training on weights, you start with the little itty bitty weights first, and then you lift them, and then you move up, right? Well, I think often, this is just kind of a hint I'm going to throw out there. Often when we sit down to read the Bible, would you hand me a Bible? There. Okay, we sit down to read a Bible like this. Well, this has really teeny tiny words in it. And when you look at it, and you're like, you can't focus. It has no explanation, nothing to explain anything. And the language is a little dated. This is an amazing Bible. This is, the translation is New Revised Standard. And if you are going to do a really important study of the Bible, this is an excellent version to use because it's going to really compare well to the Greek. But if you are sitting down in the morning when your brain is a little bit fuzzy, you might want to be using a Bible that is maybe a simpler translation. Maybe one that's called the Common English. Maybe a study Bible that explains to you the various meanings of things. Or maybe what you need to do is start with a devotional book that's on the Bible. And so it gives you a Bible verse for every day, and then it gives you a story and a practical application. It's really hard to stay focused. What we need to do as Christians is we need to set attainable goals that will help us stay focused. And part of that is getting Scripture into a form that will actually work for us. And then we need to, it's kind of like, if you were going to go out and ride a bike, has anybody bought a bike recently? Yeah, okay, so you go to the bike store, and they have like all these kinds of bikes, right? Mountain bikes and non-mountain bikes, whatever they're called. And, they have they all have these purposes. And, maybe we should be starting with the bike with the training wheels on it. But we want the flashy bike that has all the, bells and whistles. Well, the same thing with our spiritual life. Let's not start out with what has all the bells and whistles. Let's start out with the Lord's Prayer. Let's start out with simple songs. Let's start out with reading some pieces that we can understand. Because if you can get on that bike and you can ride down the block, you have a much better chance that you're going to continue the next day getting on that bike, right? The same thing about our spiritual life. We need to be able to do it in a way that we can accomplish the goals we've set before us. For world-class athletes like Katie, she set her goals, and then she trained for those goals. If you would like to have your life transformed by God, you need to do the required training. And part of what every athlete has is they have a coach. They have a person to hold them accountable. They have someone to encourage them, to help them. And so I ask you, how do you have someone coaching you in your faith journey? And then there are the team part of it is, how do we play together as a team? Because when you sit as a single person in your pew on Sunday morning, even though you're coming together as community and you have community moments, you're not a team yet. But if you're in a Bible study, so raise your hand here if you're in a Bible study. Raise your hand if you're in a small group. Raise your hand if you've done Walk to Emmaus. Raise your hand if you've gone on a retreat. If you've gone to a convention. All of these things help us to be a part of a team. So in your bulletin this morning, I am going to urge you to, A, take this home. We do not want to recycle these for you today, because it has really important stuff in it. What I did in the middle is I did a little cheat sheet for you. And so what it has here is it gives you places to go on the internet for prayer resources. It has places that you can go to look at conferences that we are offering here at this church. And there is no reason anyone should be not able to go with us, as far as do not ever let money be an obstacle, because we will find a way that you can get to a conference if it's your desire. It talks about retreats. Damien, raise your hand there. Okay, Damien is going to lead the men's Walk to Emmaus, as well as some of the men in our church are going to be a part of that team. Men's Walk to Emmaus, and then there's a women's Walk to Emmaus. These are ways in which you can grow your faith. Each day we need to set forth for us goals, and we need to train hard to live the life that Jesus taught and modeled. Throughout the Bible, we see that Jesus engaged in prayer. He engaged in study and worship and service and evangelism and stewardship, which is giving. And so we need to do the same. So I'm going to give you a little quiz, so listen up. Because I want you to think about, what does your spiritual training at this moment look like? Prayer. How often are you talking to God each day? Bible study. Are you engaged in a regular time of Bible reading or devotion? Maybe listening to something on the radio, a podcast. It isn't about how long you spent doing this, it's about consistency. If all you can get in is one verse a day, one verse is a good beginning. Worship. Are you praising God at regular times for worship? Service. How are you using your gifts to serve God's people? And evangelism. How are you sharing your relationship with God, with others? And finally, stewardship. Are you investing regularly and consistently in God's church with your time and your talents and your resources? The secret to winning the race is to truly live a Christ-like life. And in order to do that, we need to train with exactly the pieces that I've just set before you. Because in that way, we are modeling the life that Christ put before us. In conclusion, I just want to share a little something that Katie shared with an interviewer about why she works so hard. She said, I remember one particular worship service when I was deciding whether or not I was going to commit to the triathlon. She said, the entire homily felt like the minister was speaking to me. He was saying that something you need to do to get out of your comfort zone, to try new things. And so I challenge and ask you this morning, will you engage in the training so that you will have the endurance to run the race? Will you get out of your pews and get in the race and join the team?